My name is Liora Ashford. And the night my father disowned me, I was standing 12 feet away from him when he did it. It was a Tuesday evening in October. The kind of night where the city air had just turned cold and every breath came out in a small cloud. Victor Ashford, my father, chairman of the Ashford Foundation, had called a press event at the foundation's downtown offices. I was there because I was always there. 29 years of standing in the background while he stood in the light. He stepped to the podium. Cameras flashed. Reporters shifted. The crowd held their phones up and waited. Then he said my name. Not warmly. Not the way a father says a daughter's name when he is proud of her. He said it like a closing argument. He said that Liora Ashford was no longer his daughter in any meaningful sense, that all ties between them, financial, legal, familial, were severed effective immediately. The room went very still. Then someone gasped. Then the cameras flashed again, faster now, pointed at me instead of him. I did not cry. I did not move. I stood there and I let every single person in that room see my face. Security began to move toward me. I noticed that. I walked out before they reached me. Not fast. Not stumbling. I walked out the way you walk when you have decided to leave on your own terms. My heels were steady on the marble floor. My bag was on my shoulder. I did not look back. Outside, the night air hit me. I stood on the sidewalk for one moment and breathed. Then I started walking. My phone began to buzz before I reached the corner. By the time I got to my car, it had buzzed 47 times. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the screen without reading anything. I set it face down on the passenger seat. I put my hands on the steering wheel and sat there in the dark for a long time. Eventually I scrolled through the messages. Most were from journalists. Some were from people I had known for years, texting out of curiosity more than concern. Then I saw a message from a number I did not recognize. It said, "He had to do it. You are not safe." I read it 3 times. I looked out the windshield at the empty street. Then I saved the number and drove home. I did not post anything. I did not call anyone. I did not release a statement. My publicist called twice. I let it go to voicemail. My lawyer called once. I texted her back a single word, "Tomorrow." By morning, the story had been picked up by 12 national outlets. By afternoon, it was 26. Commentators offered opinions. Former family friends gave careful non-comments. The narrative began to build itself the way narratives always do when the subject stays silent, out of assumptions and speculation, and people filling empty space with whatever shape fits their existing understanding. I let them. Because I was busy. The box was one I had prepared 3 months earlier. It lived at the back of my closet behind 2 bags and a coat I never wore. Inside it were copies of documents I had started pulling together when I first noticed something was wrong inside the Ashford Foundation, the non-profit my grandfather had built and my father had run for the past 16 years. Spreadsheets. Transaction records. Correspondence. 3 years of quarterly reports with certain line items circled in pencil because I had not wanted to mark them in ink until I understood what I was looking at. I understood now. I spread them across my kitchen table and began to work. The Ashford Foundation had, on paper, given away $42 million in the past 3 years. Schools. Hospitals. Scholarship programs. Clean water projects in 4 countries. The kind of philanthropy that gets your name on buildings and your photograph in magazines. The public numbers were clean. Audited annually, published proudly, praised by every major philanthropic review organization in the country. The numbers underneath them were not. I had first noticed the discrepancy 14 months ago. A quarterly allocation to a domestic housing initiative did not match the disbursement records I had access to as a board consultant. The difference was small enough to be a data entry error. I flagged it internally and moved on. Then I noticed it again. Different project, different quarter, same pattern. Funds allocated and publicly reported did not match funds actually disbursed. The gap between them went somewhere unlabeled. I started looking for it. The accounts that absorbed the difference were layered inside legitimate-looking administrative line items and small grant disbursements that, individually, would never trigger a review. But added together, across 3 years, they represented just over $600,000. Every single one of those transactions had been authorized by a single signatory. My father's name was on all of them. His name was Ned Carver. He had worked as a senior accountant for the Ashford Foundation for 11 years before leaving quietly 8 months ago. I had met him 4 times. He was the kind of man who always seemed slightly apart from whatever room he was in. I found his contact through a former colleague and sent a message. I know about the line items. I am not here to make trouble. I am trying to understand. He took 9 days to respond. We met at a diner on the east side on a Thursday morning. He arrived late and spent the first 2 minutes checking the windows before he sat down. He ordered coffee and did not touch it. "What do you want to know?" he said. "Where the money went," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "It did not go to him," he said. "That is what most people would assume. But it did not go to Victor personally." I waited. "It went into a private, unlisted fund," he said. He called it a contingency reserve, for situations needing fast action without board approval. He paused. I never fully believed that explanation. "Why not?" I asked. "Because the fund had a second authorized signatory," Ned said. "And it was not anyone on the board." I spent 4 days after that meeting building the map. I printed everything and spread it across the living room floor. I used colored markers and long pieces of string because the work required it and because I think in spatial patterns. The physical layout helped me see connections I would have missed on a screen. The transfers had a rhythm. That was the first thing I noticed. They did not happen randomly. They clustered around specific dates. Not holidays, not fiscal quarters, not anything that made obvious operational sense. They clustered around events. I cross-referenced the transfer dates against my father's public calendar for the same period. Interviews. Speaking engagements. Award ceremonies. Foundation luncheons where he stood at a podium and talked about ethics and the importance of giving back. Every single diversion of funds, all 23 of them over 3 years, had taken place within 48 hours of a public event at which Victor Ashford had spoken about the values of the Ashford family. It was not accidental. I did not believe for 1 second that it was accidental. Someone had timed these transfers deliberately. The question was whether my father was the one doing the timing, or whether someone was using his calendar as a clock. The announcement came on a Wednesday. The Ashford Foundation's annual charity gala would proceed as planned, 6 weeks from that Friday. Bigger than previous years. A new headline partner. A live performance. An expected guest list of 400. I read the press release 3 times. My father had not cancelled the gala. After the public disowning and the media coverage and the questions that were circling if not yet landing, he was moving forward as if nothing had changed. More than that, he was escalating. This year the gala was being positioned as a statement. I understood the logic. If you want to project stability, you project it loudly. You do not retreat. You stand in the biggest room you can find and you smile until the room believes the smile. It was a strategy one had watched my father use my entire life. But here was the thing about the Ashford Charity Gala that he understood and that I also understood: it was not entirely his event. It was held at a venue the foundation rented. The guest list included donors, partners, and journalists who had their own relationships with the foundation and did not answer to Victor Ashford personally. There were elements of that room he could not completely control. I started making calls. My name had been removed from the official guest list. I confirmed this through a contact at the venue who owed me a professional favor and was willing to check without asking why. The foundation's communications team had also quietly removed my name from all gala materials. Not dramatically. Simply gone, as if I had never been part of any of it. I was not surprised. What did surprise me was the envelope that arrived at my apartment on a Monday morning, 8 days before the gala. A formal cream-colored envelope, heavyweight. No return address. No sender listed anywhere on the outside. Inside was a Gala access pass. Official. Printed on the foundation's own materials with a security code along the bottom that, I verified through my venue contact, was entirely valid. Someone had issued me a pass to an event I had been explicitly excluded from. I placed the envelope on my desk and looked at it for a long time. I thought about the anonymous text from the night of the disowning. He had to do it. You are not safe. The same person, I believed. The same careful, invisible hand. Whoever they were giving me a door. I began deciding what I would carry through it. The anonymous contact messaged again on the Thursday before the Gala. The message said, "You only have one chance. He is hiding more than money. Be ready for someone to try to use your past against you. Make sure your timeline holds." I read it standing in my living room at 7 in the morning with coffee in my hand and the documents still spread across the floor. I set the coffee down and went back to work. I was not planning to confront my father at the Gala. Confrontation is loud and messy, and it lets the other person frame the argument as emotional, as personal, as a family dispute rather than a matter of fact. I had no interest in giving anyone that frame. I was planning to reveal. Methodically. In front of the audience my father had spent years cultivating as his own. I had been in contact with the event's technical team for 6 days. A woman named Priya, who had worked the foundation's events for 4 years, listened carefully and asked one question. "Is this true?" she said. "Every word of it," I said. She thought for 3 days. Then she sent me a single message, "Tell me what you need." I spent the remaining days not rehearsing words. I rehearsed timing. The Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Langford Hotel, a room that seated 400 and made every one of them feel important. Chandeliers. Round tables with white linens. Waitstaff moving like water through the crowd. I arrived at 7:43, 22 minutes after the official start time. Late enough that the room was full. Early enough that the formal program had not yet begun. I walked in through the main entrance. I heard the moment the nearest conversations stopped. In a wave, the way silence travels through a crowd when something unexpected has entered. Heads turned. People leaned toward each other. I kept walking. My dress was dark navy. My hair was up. I had chosen both for composure, not performance. I was not there to be dramatic. I was there to be undeniable. I was halfway across the room when I saw my father. He was standing with donors near the far wall, mid-sentence, gesturing with the easy confidence of a man who owns every room he enters. Then one of his companions looked past him and something in their expression changed. Victor Ashford turned. He saw me. And for the first time in my memory, the confidence left his face completely. He recovered in under 4 seconds. I counted. By the time he crossed the room toward me, the smile was back. Controlled. Warm at the edges in the way he had perfected over decades of public life. He extended his hand as if we were professional acquaintances who had not seen each other recently. "Liora," he said. "I did not expect you this evening." "I know," I said. He kept the smile. "This is not the time or place for a conversation." "I agree completely," I said. He studied my face. He was looking for the thing that would tell him what I was about to do, how much I knew, what angle I was coming from. He was very good at reading people. But I had grown up being read by him. I had spent 29 years learning how to be unreadable in return. I smiled back. The smile seemed to unsettle him more than any confrontation would have. He could not place it. He could not locate what was behind it. After a moment he gave me a short nod and returned to his group. I watched him go. He picked up his conversation seamlessly. But twice in the following 10 minutes he glanced in my direction. I never looked away when he did. Dinner was served at 8:30. The formal program began at 9:15. My father took the stage to the kind of applause that money and familiarity produce. He wore a dark suit and moved through his opening remarks with the ease of someone who has given this speech in different forms his entire adult life. He talked about legacy. He talked about the responsibility of those who have been given much. The room was attentive. People nodded. I was sitting at a table near the back, which was exactly where I had chosen to sit. From there I had a clear sight line to the stage and to the large projection screens on either side of it. I also had a sight line to the door through which Priya had confirmed she would be watching for my signal. I kept my hands flat on the table. My father was building toward his closing remarks. I knew this speech. I had watched versions of it for years. There was a particular cadence he used near the end, a set of 3 sentences that built in rhythm and ended in a phrase about the foundation's future. He was 2 minutes from that phrase. I caught Priya's eye across the room. I gave her a single small nod. The screens behind my father changed. He did not notice immediately. He was mid-sentence, his back partially turned, his hand raised for emphasis. The first person to notice was a woman in the 3rd row whose expression shifted from politely engaged to sharply focused. Then the man next to her looked up. Then the table behind them. My father finished his sentence. He turned slightly, registered the change in the room's energy, and looked behind him at the screens. What he saw was not chaotic. It was not inflammatory. It was a clean, formatted financial report on a white background. Column headers. Row numbers. Dates, amounts, account references. The kind of document that looks, to a practiced eye, unmistakably official. The room did not erupt. It went very still, the way rooms go still when something important has appeared and everyone is deciding simultaneously how to respond. My father turned back to the audience. His expression was careful. He had not seen this document before, that much was visible. But he was too experienced to show anything beyond careful. This appears to be some kind of technical issue, he said. His voice was entirely steady. A few people laughed weakly. Most did not. I pushed back my chair and stood up. Every head in the room turned toward me. I walked to the front at a measured pace. Not rushing. Not hesitating. The way you walk when you have decided that this moment belongs to you. The report on the screens showed 3 years of specific transactions. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers with their last 4 digits visible. The allocations that had been publicly announced and the amounts actually disbursed. The gap between them, labeled clearly, added up to $614,000 across 23 separate transactions. My father watched me walk. He had recovered his composure. His expression was measured and slightly disappointed, the expression of a father whose troubled child has done something embarrassing in public. "This is neither the time nor the venue for a personal grievance," he said. "It is not a personal grievance," I said. I did not have a microphone, but the room was quiet enough that I did not need one. "It is a financial record. These figures require context," he said. "Charitable accounting involves complex structuring." "I know how charitable accounting works," I said. "I designed the original financial reporting system for this foundation 7 years ago. I know what standard structuring looks like." I looked at him directly. "And I know what this is." The room was absolutely silent. I had not spoken publicly since the disowning. 3 weeks of silence, of letting other people's voices fill the space where mine should have been. I had watched the narratives form. I had let them. Now I was here. 7 years ago, I said, my father asked me to build a financial transparency system for this foundation. A system that would allow the board, the donors, and the public to trust that every dollar allocated was a dollar deployed. I built it. I documented it. I trained the staff on it. I paused. The transactions on that screen did not go through that system. They went around it. Through administrative subaccounts created after I built the original architecture. Subaccounts that exist specifically to avoid the transparency layer I designed. Someone in the middle of the room said something I could not hear. A murmur rippled outward. "I am not here to accuse anyone of anything tonight," I said. "I am here because 3 weeks ago I was publicly removed from this family in this city's newspapers. The people in this room have given their money and their names to this foundation. They deserve to understand why that happened and what it was meant to prevent them from seeing." Ned Carver was standing near the back wall. I had not told him to come. He had come on his own, which told me something important about what it had cost him to sit with what he knew and do nothing. He raised his hand when I looked toward the back. "My name is Ned Carver," he said, loudly enough for the room to hear. "I was a senior accountant at the Ashford Foundation from 2013 to last year. I handled quarterly disbursement records for 8 of those 11 years. The room turned toward him. "What Liora is describing is accurate," he said. "The sub-accounts she referenced were created in the second year of her tenure on the board. She did not create them. She did not authorize them. She was not told about them." My father said nothing. "I flagged the discrepancy internally twice," Ned continued. "Both times I was told the accounts were under review and the matter was handled. Both times nothing changed." He paused. "I left the foundation because I could no longer certify the accuracy of documents I did not believe were accurate." He stopped. He looked once at my father and then looked away. "He did not act alone," Ned said. "There was a second party involved." The name that followed came from Ned, spoken carefully and without drama. The name was Councillor Damien Holt. Damien Holt was 61 years old, a city councillor with a 20-year record and a reputation for supporting civic causes. He had been a public advocate for the Ashford Foundation for nearly a decade. His face was on the foundation's donor wall in the lobby outside this room. He was sitting 4 tables to my left. Every head in the room turned toward him. Damien Holt rose slowly to his feet. His expression was the specific control of a man who has prepared for a version of this moment. "These are serious and unfounded allegations," he said. "I have supported this foundation in a public capacity for 10 years. I have no operational role, no financial access, and no involvement in any internal accounting decisions." Then he reached into his jacket pocket and removed a folded document. "Furthermore," he said, "the room should be aware that the person making these claims was herself flagged internally for approving early versions of these same transactions." He unfolded the document. "I have a signed authorization form. The signature is Liora Ashford's." He placed it on the nearest table and stepped back. The room turned toward me. I smiled. I recognized the document from across the room. Not because I had seen that specific printout before. Because I had created the original file it was printed from, deliberately altered 3 fields inside it, and left it somewhere it would be found. The document was a test. I had built it 6 weeks ago, after Ned's first confirmation that a second party was involved. I understood that whoever that party was would eventually try to redirect blame toward me. The form looked authentic. The signature looked real. But 3 fields inside it were wrong in a way that only someone who had modified the original would have introduced. I stepped forward. "May I see that document?" I said. Damien Holt held it out with the confidence of a man who believes he holds a weapon. I took it and looked at it for 5 seconds. "This document has been altered," I said. "The original file was created and stored on a foundation server 6 weeks ago. These 3 fields were changed after the file was accessed." I turned to the room. "I know they were changed after my disowning because the original unaltered version was submitted to a regulatory body 4 weeks ago, before anyone had reason to doctor it. The timestamps do not match. The access logs for the Foundation's document server," I said, "show that this file was opened 4 days after I was publicly disowned. Not before. Not during my time on the board. 4 days after." I set the document on the nearest table. "If I had authorized those transactions," I said, "there would be no reason to alter the record afterward. Records are altered when the original does not say what someone needs it to say." Damien Holt was still standing. His composure was holding, but it had become the kind that is visible as effort rather than ease. "You could have altered those logs yourself," he said. "I could have," I said. "Which is why I did not rely on the logs alone." I nodded to Priya. The screens changed. A comparison document appeared. Left side, the original file with its correct fields, time-stamped and digitally certified by a third-party service 4 weeks ago. Right side, Damien Holt's version, with the 3 modified fields highlighted in red. The certification date on the left was 2 weeks before my disowning. The modification date on the right was 4 days after. The audience could read. Several leaned forward. Several others sat back in the particular way of people who have just understood something they cannot unfeel. My father had not spoken in 11 minutes. I had been counting. He was still standing at the podium but had stopped holding the microphone. He was watching the room with the detachment of someone who has not yet fully accepted that the distance is an illusion. Then he stepped forward and picked up the microphone again. "I cut Liora off to protect the foundation," he said. The room waited. There were internal concerns. A potential review. Having a family member involved in any disputed transactions, even tangentially, created a liability I could not afford. He said it with the measured weight of a man delivering an uncomfortable but necessary truth. The room shifted slightly. It was a very well-constructed statement, and I could feel it working on people who did not yet know the rest. "You cut me off," I said, 2 days before a regulatory inquiry notice was officially filed with the foundation. Not to protect the foundation. To create distance between yourself and what was about to happen. A disowned daughter cannot be compelled to testify on behalf of her father's organization. The legal separation you created that night was not about protecting me or the foundation. I looked at him directly. It was about protecting yourself from what I already knew. I took out the envelope. It was a simple white envelope. Inside was a 14-page document that I placed on the nearest table without unfolding, because the audience did not need to read it. They only needed to know it existed. For weeks ago, I said, a formal regulatory inquiry was initiated into the financial practices of the Ashford Foundation. The inquiry is focused on the sub-accounts Ned described, the disbursement gap on those screens, and the identity of the second authorized signatory on the unlisted reserve fund. I paused. I know about the inquiry because I am one of the parties who submitted documentation to the investigators. Voluntarily. In writing. With a full record of what I had found. The room was absolutely still. The investigators are thorough and independent. Their process does not require a room full of witnesses. It only requires documents. And documents, unlike speeches, do not care about the size of the audience. I looked at my father. I could see, in the particular stillness that had come over him, the exact moment he understood that the inquiry was not something he could manage around. It was already underway. It had been underway for 4 weeks. The room fractured the way rooms do when the ground beneath them has shifted. Tables nearest the exit began to show the subtle choreography of people preparing to leave. A man in a grey suit made a phone call with his back turned. 2 of my father's most visible public supporters were speaking to each other in the careful voices of people revising a position. Damien Holt had sat back down. He was looking at his phone. My father stood at the podium without moving. One of the foundation's largest donors stood and said my name. "Liora, are you formally accusing your father of misconduct tonight?" "No," I said. "This is not a legal proceeding." "Then what is it?" "It is a conversation that should have happened privately," I said. "And that could not, because I was removed from any forum where it could take place." A woman I did not know asked, "What do you want the foundation to do?" I had thought about that question for weeks. I had drafted answers in margins at 2 in the morning when the apartment was quiet. "I want the foundation to survive," I said. "I want it to serve the communities it was built for. What I do next depends on whether that is still possible." I could have demanded his resignation from the podium. I could have projected the regulatory filing number on the screen, named the investigators, laid out every document, every transfer, every date and account reference in sequence until nothing was left to dispute. I had the material to do all of it. I did not. "What I am going to do," I said, "is hand everything I have to the proper authorities. Not in this room. Not as a spectacle. The investigators who are already working on this case will receive every document I brought tonight, through my attorney, before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." I looked at my father. "I am not doing this to destroy you," I said. "I am doing this because the people in this room deserve accurate accounting. They deserve to know where their money goes. That is not vengeance. It is exactly what you taught me matters most." I stepped back. The applause, when it came, was not the kind my father's speeches produced. It was slower, quieter. It started from a single person in the middle of the room and moved outward. The sound of a room that had been asked to hold something complicated and had chosen to hold it with dignity. It was the finest sound I had ever heard. I watched my father's world rearrange itself in the following 30 minutes. The donor in the grey suit finished his phone call and did not return to his seat. 3 board members, who had been sitting together near the stage, were now in separate corners having separate conversations. A journalist I recognized from the coverage after the disowning had moved to the edge of the room and was watching everything with the calm focus of someone who has just found the story they came for. Damien Holt left at 9:51 without speaking to anyone. My father came to me at 10:10. He walked across the emptying room without hurry. He had put his jacket back on. I had prepared myself for anger, for the cold formality he had used at the press event 3 weeks ago, for the performance he had been giving his whole life. What I saw instead was something I had not seen on his face since I was very small. He looked tired. Not tired as a costume of burden. Tired in the way that is simply and completely real. He stopped 2 feet away and looked at me for a long moment. "I made choices," he said quietly. "I know," I said. I stepped outside at 10:30. The night air was cold and the city held the particular quiet of very late, not empty but still. I stood on the steps of the Langford Hotel and looked out at the street and breathed. My phone buzzed. The message was from the unknown number, the same one that had sent 4 words the night of the disowning. This message said, "You did it right." He was going to use you as cover for the investigation, claim the suspicious transactions were tied to your consulting work. The disowning was meant to separate your name from his before the inquiry closed in. I have been inside the foundation for 6 years. I sent you the pass because you were the only one I believed would use the truth correctly. I typed back, "Who are you?" The answer came in under a minute. "Priya." I looked through the glass doors at the ballroom, where Priya was quietly coiling cable with the same calm efficiency she had brought to everything else. She did not look up, but she was smiling. I turned back to the night and breathed, the way you breathe when you have set something down. My name was mine. It had always been mine. He had never had the power to take it.